I had just lost everything: my company, my savings, and my family's trust. But with only $50,000 left to my name, I did something no one expected. And it would shock everyone, especially the parents who had refused to help me when I needed them most. What happened next? A complete turn of fate that no one saw coming. Stay with me, because this is a story you won't forget. The phone call was over before I even realized it. The words hung in the air like a cold, bitter truth that I hadn't prepared myself for. "We can't help you anymore. You've done this to yourself," my father had said, his voice steady and final, just like every other decision he'd made in my life. I sat there, my phone pressed tightly against my ear, my heart pounding in my chest as the sound of his voice echoed in my head. I could hear the disappointment in his tone, the sense of finality in his words. It wasn't just rejection, it was a judgment of me, of everything I had tried to build, of everything I had sacrificed to get where I was. And now, after everything, my own parents, the ones who should have been there, were turning their backs on me. The last few years had been a blur. There were moments when it felt like everything was finally coming together, when I thought the struggle was over. I had been so close to the success I had dreamed of, but it all came crashing down, faster than I could have imagined. The company I had poured my soul into, gone. The investors, once so eager to pour their money into my ideas, had pulled out at the first sign of trouble. The creditors, relentless, had driven me to the edge. And now, here I was, sitting alone in the dimly lit corner of my apartment, with nothing left but a mountain of debt and a broken dream. I hadn't expected my parents to fix everything, but I had hoped they would offer more than the cold indifference in their voices. They hadn't seen the sleepless nights, the endless hours spent trying to keep everything afloat. They hadn't seen the sacrifices I had made, the friends I had lost, the family moments I had missed. All they saw was a failure, and they were done. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" My father's words from the phone rang in my ears. "You had everything, and you threw it all away. You could have just taken a regular job, done the safe thing. But no, you wanted to play the hero." The hero. Was that what I had become? A hero to no one but myself? I didn't know anymore. All I knew was that I had a choice to make. I couldn't just let this be the end. I couldn't let everything I'd worked for, everything I believed in, go to waste. Even if they had given up on me, I still had one thing left: the last $50,000 in my account. It wasn't much, not nearly enough to fix everything, but it was something. I closed my eyes, trying to quiet the chaos in my mind, the weight of everything that had gone wrong, the crushing disappointment of losing everything I had fought for. It all felt like too much, but deep down, there was a fire, a spark that refused to die. They didn't believe in me, but I believed in myself. So I made my decision. I wouldn't waste this. I wouldn't let this last $50,000 slip away, like everything else I had lost. I would use it to prove them wrong, to prove that I wasn't just a failure. I was more than that. This wasn't the end of my story. This was just the beginning. The decision wasn't easy. In fact, it was terrifying. I knew the risks, knew how much was riding on this, but something in me refused to let fear control my next steps. The numbers danced in my mind. $50,000, my last lifeline, and I began to think about how best to use it. I had been an entrepreneur once, full of big dreams and even bigger ideas. But now, after everything had crumbled, I was looking at that money not as a safety net, but as a ticket to my redemption, a ticket to proving that I was capable of more than what my parents and the world thought of me. I sat there, the silence in my apartment almost suffocating, as I thought about what I could do. What could I build with what little I had left? The obvious option was to invest in something safe, something that would promise at least a small return. But safe was the last thing I wanted to be. I had always believed that success didn't come from playing it safe. It came from taking risks, from betting on yourself when no one else would. That's how I had started this journey in the first place, and it was how I intended to finish it. I had been watching the market closely for the past few months, trying to find something that spoke to me, something I could pour my last resources into and make something worthwhile out of it. And then I saw it, a small but rapidly growing tech startup that was on the verge of something big. The founders were brilliant, and the product they were developing, an innovative AI-driven solution, was gaining traction. They had the vision, the drive, but they lacked one thing: the financial backing to get them over the hump. I knew that in order to succeed, I needed to act fast. I couldn't waste any time. I reached out to the startup's founders and set up a meeting. The drive to their office felt different from the countless meetings I'd attended in the past. This time, I wasn't sitting across from investors or executives trying to impress them. This time, I was the one who had something to offer, something that could change the trajectory of my life. When I walked into their small, cluttered office, the founders looked at me like I was just another potential investor, someone they could pitch to and hopefully win over. But I wasn't there to make a pitch. I was there to change everything. I introduced myself, explained my situation, and laid it all on the table. I told them I had lost everything, but still believed in the potential of their idea. I had the resources to help them take the next step, but only if they were willing to take a chance on me. They didn't know my backstory, didn't know what had led me to this point. But I wasn't interested in explaining my failures. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I wanted them to see the same thing I saw in them: an opportunity to rebuild, to grow, to prove that failure wasn't the end, but the beginning of something greater. It wasn't an easy sell. They were skeptical at first. After all, I was asking them to trust someone who had just been knocked down. But after a few hours of conversation, they began to see my vision. We could make this work. Together, we could turn their startup into something monumental. I left the meeting with a signed agreement and a sense of hope I hadn't felt in months. The $50,000 I had invested wasn't just a financial contribution, it was a statement. I was betting on myself again. I was betting on the belief that I could still make something of my life, even if no one else thought it was possible. But now the hard part was just beginning. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if this gamble would pay off or if I would lose everything for the second time. But I did know one thing: I wasn't going to let my parents or anyone else define what I could or couldn't do. I was going to prove them wrong. In the weeks that followed, everything seemed to move at a dizzying pace. The startup was small, but the energy in the office was electric. Everyone was working nonstop, their eyes set on the future. And for the first time in a long while, I felt that spark again. I was part of something. This wasn't just a company. It was my chance to build something from the ground up. It was my second shot at redemption. The team was a mix of young innovators and seasoned professionals, and together we began to develop and fine-tune the product. Every day felt like a new challenge, a new obstacle that we had to overcome. Some days I could feel the weight of the $50,000 I had invested, like it was pressing down on me, reminding me of everything I had lost. But every time I felt the pressure, I pushed through. This time, I had a reason to keep going, because failure wasn't an option anymore. I remember the first breakthrough we had. It was late one night when the development team finally perfected a key component of the product. It was small, but it was everything. The sense of accomplishment in that moment was indescribable, like the universe had opened up and given us a glimpse of what was possible. We were on the right path, and every ounce of my energy went into pushing that momentum forward. But I knew there were still obstacles. The startup needed more funding to scale, and the competition was fierce. Investors were skeptical. No one wanted to back a company that had so many risks. Everyone remembered the collapse of the tech bubble, the crashes, the companies that had failed because they overreached or made the wrong moves. The doubts were everywhere, and they threatened to tear us apart at the seams. But I refused to let fear stop me. I'd already lost everything once. I wasn't going to let it happen again. I knew I had to take bigger risks to make this work. I started reaching out to people in my network, pulling in every contact I had from my previous ventures. It was uncomfortable, selling myself to people who had already written me off, but I did it anyway. One by one, I managed to secure small investors who were willing to take a chance on us. Each one saw something in the product, in the vision of what we were trying to build. Slowly but surely, the startup began to gain traction. We moved from one small office to a larger space. We hired more people, expanded the team, and started gaining media attention. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's story unfold, but I was the one at the center of it. And then, a month after I had made my investment, something incredible happened. A major tech company, one of the giants in the industry, reached out to us. They wanted to discuss a potential acquisition. I couldn't believe it. After everything I'd been through, after all the sacrifices, after risking the last of my savings on a dream, we were on the verge of something bigger than I had ever imagined. This was the moment I had been waiting for, but as I sat in the meeting room, listening to the offers, I couldn't help but feel a pang of uncertainty. I had been so focused on getting to this point that I hadn't fully considered what it would mean to sell. Would I be letting go of everything I had worked so hard to build? Was this really the success I had been striving for? I thought about my parents, about the rejection, the judgment, the feeling that they would never understand the choices I had made. Would they be proud of me now, seeing how far I had come? Or would they still see me as someone who had failed, despite everything I had achieved? For a moment, I almost lost my nerve. But then I remembered why I started this journey in the first place. I wasn't doing this for them. I wasn't doing this to prove anything to anyone else. I was doing this for myself, to show that even when everything falls apart, you can still rise from the ashes and build something new. The decision wasn't easy, but I knew it was time to take the next step. The deal with the tech giant was both a dream and a nightmare. On one hand, it was everything I had worked for, an opportunity to cash in on years of hard work, to see my vision finally realized on a grand scale. On the other hand, it was the very thing I had feared, selling out, giving up control of something I had built from nothing. As I sat across from their executives, listening to the numbers they threw at me, a part of me hesitated. But the offer was too big to ignore. The money, the resources, the validation, everything I had wanted was right in front of me. It was the kind of success I had only dreamed of before, when I was just starting out with nothing but ambition and the hope that one day I'd make it. Now, here I was, sitting at the table with some of the most powerful people in the industry, my hard work about to pay off in a way I never could have imagined. But what did it really mean? Was this success, or was it just another way of giving up? I stared at the papers in front of me, the weight of the decision pressing down on me, and then it hit me. This wasn't about what anyone else thought. It wasn't about my parents or the investors or anyone else who doubted me along the way. This was about me, about proving that I was capable of something bigger. I had started this journey alone, and I was going to finish it the same way. With a deep breath, I signed the agreement. The deal was done. And just like that, everything changed. I remember walking out of that meeting, my mind racing. There was a rush of excitement mixed with a sense of finality. I had just sold a piece of my soul, but in return, I was free, free from the weight of my past mistakes, free from the crushing burden of trying to prove myself to others. This was my moment, my victory, and nothing could take it away from me. But as I walked out of the building, I couldn't help but think of my parents. I hadn't told them about the deal yet. Would they understand? Would they be proud of what I had done? Or would they still see it as me running away from my past? I couldn't predict how they would react, but I knew one thing. This was the moment that everything changed. Over the next few days, the news of the acquisition spread like wildfire. The media couldn't get enough of it. The underdog tech startup, the one no one believed in, had just been bought by one of the biggest players in the industry. I was suddenly a hero in the eyes of the business world, a success story that people would talk about for years to come. But as the headlines piled up, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, the feeling that even though I had made it, I hadn't fully closed the chapter on everything that had happened before. Then came the phone call. It was from my mother, and I had been waiting for it, knowing it would come. She sounded different, softer, almost hesitant. I could hear the emotion in her voice, the way she was trying to hide the tears. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "We've been hearing the news, and we wanted to call, but I didn't know what to say." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Everything I had worked for had led me to this moment. And now, here was my mother, reaching out to me, the one person who had doubted me the most. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Better than fine, actually. You've heard about the deal, right? We did it. The company's been acquired. I did it." There was silence on the other end, and I could feel her processing the information. I I don't know what to say," she finally said. "I never thought you'd be able to pull it off after everything, but you did. You really did." It was strange hearing her admit that she had been wrong, but it wasn't about her admitting anything. It was about what I had done. For the first time, I felt like I had earned her respect, her understanding. And it felt good. It felt like the weight of the past few years, the rejection, the doubts, everything that had held me back, was finally lifting. "I know, Mom," I said, my voice softening. "I know you didn't believe in me, but I had to believe in myself. I couldn't wait for anyone else to do it for me." There was a long pause, and then she spoke again, this time with a hint of pride in her voice. "I'm proud of you. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm proud of what you've done. You've proven that even when it feels like everything's falling apart, you can still build something." Her words hit me harder than I expected. After everything, after all the pain, all the struggle, this was the moment I had been waiting for. This was my redemption, not from the world, not from my parents, but from myself. I had proven that I could rise above it all, but as I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but wonder, was this enough? Was proving my worth to them enough to make up for all the years of disappointment? For now, I had the success. I had the deal. I had the respect. And that was enough. But the journey was far from over. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I was thrust into a new life, a new reality. The media interviews, the press releases, the public recognition. It was all so overwhelming, yet strangely fulfilling. Every day, it felt like I was living in someone else's story, like this success was happening to a different person, not the one who had sat in that apartment, bankrupt and broken, just months earlier. The tech giant's acquisition had made headlines, and the world was now looking at me as a success story. But deep down, I knew that none of this would matter if I didn't stay focused. I had made it this far, but now the real work was beginning. The startup had grown exponentially. We had new investors, new teams, and new resources. The office that had once felt cramped and full of uncertainty was now buzzing with excitement. We were scaling, reaching heights I had never thought possible, when I first wrote that $50,000 check, but there was something nagging at the back of my mind, something I couldn't shake off. The deal had changed everything for the company, but it had also changed me. With each passing day, the success that seemed so sweet began to feel a little hollow. I had always been driven by the idea of building something meaningful, of creating something that would stand the test of time. But now, with the acquisition complete, it felt like I had sold a part of myself. Sure, the money was great, the accolades were pouring in, but there was a quiet voice inside me telling me that maybe I hadn't built what I had set out to. Then came the moment that changed everything. It wasn't in the boardroom or during a press interview. It was a conversation with my old mentor, someone I had trusted, someone who had been by my side when I started out, when the idea was just a spark of inspiration. He called me out of the blue one evening, just as I was about to shut down for the night. "Hey, Ruth, I've been hearing a lot about you lately," he said, his voice filled with amusement, but also something deeper, something I couldn't quite place. "You know, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. You've made a name for yourself, built something from nothing, and now you're sitting at the top." I didn't know where this was going, but I couldn't help but feel a pang of pride. "Thanks, Mark. It's been a crazy journey. But here's the thing," he continued, and his tone shifted. "I've been watching you, and I see the way you're reacting to all this success. Don't get me wrong, it's impressive, but it's like you're running away from something. It's like you're trying to prove something to everyone but yourself." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I hadn't realized it until then, but he was right. The external validation, the money, the deals, they had become my shield. I had been so focused on proving everyone wrong, especially my parents, that I hadn't taken a moment to reflect on what I really wanted. What was the point of all this if it didn't bring me fulfillment? What was the point of building something if I didn't believe in it anymore? That night, I sat alone in my office, staring at the glass wall that overlooked the city. The lights of the city twinkled below, reminding me of the distance I had traveled. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The excitement of the deal, the admiration of my peers, it all felt temporary. It was like a fleeting high that never lasted. I began to ask myself the hard questions. Was this really what I wanted? Was I happy with how things had turned out, or had I sacrificed too much of myself to get here? I had built my career on the idea of entrepreneurship and independence, but now that I had reached the pinnacle of success, I felt more lost than ever. In that moment of self-doubt, I remembered the reason I had started this journey: to create something meaningful, to leave a legacy. I couldn't let the pursuit of money or approval dictate my next steps. I had to take control of my own narrative, not just for the sake of others, but for me. It was time to step away from the spotlight, to recalibrate, and to remember why I had started this whole journey in the first place. The next day, I called a meeting with the executives. I told them that while I appreciated everything we had built, I needed to take a step back. I couldn't continue chasing something that wasn't mine anymore. I didn't want to be defined by the sale or the media attention. I wanted to go back to the roots of what I had always believed in, creating something that mattered, something that would leave a lasting impact. The decision was hard, but it felt right. It felt like I was reclaiming my soul, my purpose. And for the first time in months, I felt at peace. The decision to step back from the spotlight wasn't easy, and I knew it wouldn't be understood by everyone. The company, the media, even my own family, they had all invested so much in the story of my success. And yet, here I was, choosing to walk away from it. But the moment I made that decision, it was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't chasing anything. I wasn't trying to prove myself to anyone. I was simply doing what felt right. I took a few weeks to recalibrate, to reconnect with myself. I spent more time with people who mattered to me, not for business reasons, but because I wanted to. I reevaluated my goals, my values, and the kind of impact I wanted to have. I was no longer interested in collecting accolades or being celebrated. What I truly wanted now was to build something meaningful, something that would last longer than the next media cycle. During this time of reflection, I also began to reconnect with the reason I had started this journey in the first place, creating something that helped people, that made a difference. And as I thought about what truly mattered to me, a new vision started to form. I realized that my success was never just about the money. It wasn't about the validation or proving others wrong. It was about the journey, about learning from my mistakes and pushing forward, no matter how hard it got. The $50,000 I had invested wasn't just about saving me. It was about proving that even when you feel like you've lost everything, you can still rise from the ashes and rebuild. The vision that began to take shape was simple, yet powerful. Instead of focusing on scaling up and chasing endless growth, I decided to focus on creating a platform that empowered others to do the same. I wanted to help young entrepreneurs, especially those who came from difficult backgrounds, find their footing, just as I had. I wanted to create a community where people could learn from my mistakes and successes, where they could find guidance and support in their own journeys. I started by investing in educational initiatives, mentorship programs, workshops, and resources that would help people build their own businesses. I wanted to give them the tools to succeed, the knowledge to navigate the obstacles I had faced, and the confidence to take risks. It wasn't about handing them a ready-made solution. It was about teaching them how to find their own way, how to trust in themselves, even when the world doubted them. As I began to pour my time and energy into this new vision, I could feel the shift within me. The feeling of fulfillment I had been searching for started to grow. This was what I had been missing all along, the opportunity to give back, to create something that wasn't just about me, but about helping others achieve their own dreams. It was about sharing my story, not to boast, but to show others that it's never too late to start over, never too late to take control of your life and build something meaningful. The reactions were immediate. Young entrepreneurs, many of them struggling just like I had, started reaching out to me. They wanted to know how I had done it, how I had rebuilt my life and my career. I started hosting webinars, sharing my story, and offering practical advice. And the more I did, the more I realized that this was where I was meant to be, helping others, guiding them through the challenges, and giving them the tools to succeed on their own terms. As the months passed, I saw the results of my new vision take shape. The mentorship programs were thriving, and the stories of success that came out of the workshops were incredible. Entrepreneurs were starting their own businesses, turning their ideas into reality, and building companies that were rooted in authenticity and purpose. And through it all, I watched as they found their own version of success, one that wasn't defined by money or external validation, but by the impact they made on their communities and the lives they touched. But the most profound shift was in my own life. I had found peace, not in the success I had chased for so long, but in the act of giving back. I had built a business, but more importantly, I had built a legacy. It wasn't a legacy of wealth or accolades. It was a legacy of empowerment, of helping others rise above their struggles and find their own path. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. My parents called me, this time not with words of judgment, but with pride. "We've been hearing about the work you've been doing," my mother said, her voice filled with something I hadn't heard before, respect. "And we wanted to say, we're proud of you, not for the money you've made, but for the difference you're making in people's lives." For the first time, I realized that I didn't need their approval to feel successful. It was never about what they thought of me. It was about what I thought of myself. And in that moment, I knew I had finally achieved what I had been seeking all along: fulfillment, peace, and the knowledge that I had built something meaningful, not just for myself, but for the people I was helping every day. As I stood in front of my office window, looking out at the city below, I realized that the journey was far from over. There were still challenges ahead, still dreams to chase, still lives to impact. But I knew that whatever came next, I would face it with the confidence of someone who had already proven that they could rise from the ashes. Someone who had learned that success isn't just about the destination. It's about the journey, the people you help along the way, and the person you become as you move forward. And with that, I knew that the story of my success was no longer just about me. It was about all of us, those who had been knocked down and rose again, those who had fought for what they believed in, and those who would continue to push forward no matter the odds. It wasn't just a business anymore. It was a movement built on the belief that no matter how many times you fall, you can always rise.